All right, good morning, everyone. Thanks, Ramon. I appreciate the handout there. So before we really get started, let me introduce myself first. My name is Chad Bakeman. I am the technical architect and development lead on this project. And so my challenge is to take the beautiful designs that Ramon and his team create and take the user's requirements and build out that vision and create it and so that it's really useful. So before we get into the conversation around what we did for the dev work, can I just kind of get a little bit of a show of hands here? How many of you out here are designers and graphic artists? Okay, small group, but we do have some. Good. How many of you would you call yourselves the developers in your organization? Okay, I figured that was the majority of the community. And then other people, project managers, QA, etc. Just a handful. Okay, so that's good to know, just to kind of get a sense of where everybody is. So you guys saw the vision demo. You saw the design. Now, did anybody, all of you developers out there, did anybody have a slight fear about how you're going to implement that? I mean, when you saw that, because I know when I saw it, I was like, this is awesome. Oh, I got to build that. Oh, okay. So there was definitely some unknown there. And we'll talk a little bit about how we got past that and how we work through those things. So this project, I like this quote because, every software project is a journey. And I don't think anybody who's worked in software development for very long has ever had a project that finished exactly where you thought it was going to end up when you started, right? You always have some ups and downs, some hurdles, some challenges. If you don't, I really want to pick your brain because I don't know how you're doing it. So we had a lot of little challenges and some big challenges, and we had to do a lot of collaboration and prototyping to work through those. And, another thing I wanted to mention, if anybody has tried to go to the Blue Angels website, you may have noticed that it's still their old site. So a little bit about kind of where we're at with getting the site up and running. There have been a couple little issues such as what happened in Japan, the tsunami in Japan, and the government, our US government's been helping there, sending fleet ships there as well as support. Also, we had a little bit of government shutdown talk. So since we're relying, as Cindy said, on some of the IT support from the military, things are a little behind schedule. So we're really hoping to get the site up very soon for you guys to see live. It's not there yet. So if anybody's been trying to hit the site and say, you guys are talking about this great site, I want to see it, and I can't, that's why. So it will be live soon, so I wanted to call that out. Okay, so what did I think were kind of the 3 key points to making this project a success? First, we really had to understand the client. We had to understand what their motivators were, what their limitations were, what their goals were for the site. You need to have some empathy for the client, what they're trying to do. You need to understand the design team's vision. Okay, so they've done this great design, and I mean, who is a developer here wouldn't love to lean on these design guys because it makes me look good. Because I'm creating a beautiful site, and a whole lot of that work came from design. If I had to create that visual, you wouldn't want to see it. So my kudos to them. And then finally, it's my team's job to really explore and execute on that vision to make it a reality. So when it comes down to putting together the nuts and bolts, that's my team. Let's talk a little bit about the 2 clients. So we have Microsoft, and we have the Blue Angels. Microsoft, obviously, technically savvy, right? Again, a little intimidating doing a software project for Microsoft. If you make some mistakes, chances are they're going to notice. So very high expectations. But one great thing about them as a client is they get software development. They do it all the time. So when you raise a question and say, this is a challenge, this is a problem, okay, I see what you're saying, I understand, let's try and work past it. And as Cindy pointed out, this is our actual client, right? These are the people who on a daily basis were touching base with us because they were really leading the project as our immediate client. Then you've got the Blue Angels. Again, very high expectations. Ramon talked about that. Very precise, very detail-oriented. Not so technically expert as far as managing a website and development. Now, I don't want anybody to send like flame mail to our Effective UI account. I'm not saying that the Navy and the Marine Corps don't have technical people. I know they've got some incredibly sophisticated technology. The Blue Angels specifically, their job is not doing a website. Their job is showing off the skills of the Navy and the Marine Corps and recruiting new members and being a PR representative for the military. So that's their focus, not websites. Excuse me. So this is actually, though, our ultimate client as far as when we hand the project over. They're the ones that have to be happy with it. They're the ones that we're representing. When you go to the Blue Angels website, these are the people that need to be proud of what they're seeing. These are the people that you're truly representing. So we must make sure that we're really satisfying them as well. And so let's look at some of the very specific technical requirements we received from the two different clients. Microsoft, as Cindy said, it was a Silverlight and HTML5 showcase. They really wanted to highlight some of those new technologies. And Silverlight's not new, but as everybody knows, they keep working on new changes to Silverlight. HTML5, of course, is kind of the new hotness, right? You know, we've got IE9, Microsoft's first real serious commitment to HTML5, just recently released. And Tony will actually talk a bit about some of the challenges we ran into there. They wanted a media-rich, engaging site. So we actually heard from Microsoft. They said, we want you to be able to, it'd be great if you could do some kind of visualization of the aircraft. We want to do multiple video angles. We'd really like to be able to basically replay the experience you get at the site. But we actually want you to be able to see what the pilot sees. We want you to be able to see what the pilot's experiencing while they're making these maneuvers. And we want you to be able to see what you would see from the ground. Okay, so that's 3 different camera angles, and that's a challenge. So we got a lot of technical requirements from Microsoft that were, not how to build it, but what they wanted to see. They wanted us to tie into the social networking aspect that Blue Angels had already started, but hadn't surfaced on the website. And they would like for SharePoint to be integrated. SharePoint is a great, real lightweight CMS. In this case, is what their vision was. So the Blues could manage their content via SharePoint, and it would publish to the site. The Blue Angels, of course, it's recruiting and PR, as you already heard. It's a government site, has to be 508 compliant. And that directed some technology choices, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Simple maintenance. They didn't want to become webmasters. They wanted to do their job and be able to update this. And they weren't making a lot of changes. As Cindy mentioned, there's a new team that comes in every year. Not everybody switches over every year inside the Blue Angels organization, but every year there is turnover. There are folks that leave the Blue Angels and folks that join. So they wanted to surface a lot more information. So many people think about the Blues as just the pilots, but there's a team of about 100 people that make it happen. And they wanted to get more face time for those folks. Okay, so at the very high level, I'm looking at this and looking at the requirements. And I said, okay, so what's our architecture going to be here? So we're going to use Microsoft ASP.NET to host the site. Pretty much a no-brainer there with Microsoft as our client. But we decided we didn't need any complexity of things like MVC because the content is more or less static. It changes periodically. But also, for maintenance by the Blue Angels, some of the concepts of doing things like an MVC framework, when you start going to somebody who doesn't do web development as their forte, that gets a little more complex. So we stayed with just traditional ASP.NET. We did use master pages to frame out things like the navigation templates, CSS, loading config settings, etc. So we leveraged some of those core pieces of ASP.NET to our benefit. We used Silverlight for the real heavy multimedia content and also some progressive enhancement, and we'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like. But we used IIS Smooth Streaming for the video content that you'll see on the site. We also used some of the media framework components. So we used this Microsoft's Smooth Streaming media element and the video brush, and I'll show you a little bit later how that worked. And then HTML5, we wanted to, when you come to a home page, there's nothing more frustrating than hitting a home page and getting oops, you need a plugin to view this, right? So we used HTML5 to give a rich experience on the home page, but have graceful degradation so that if you don't have HTML5 browser, you don't really even know what you're missing. And Tony will actually talk more about the HTML5 features. Oh, and I didn't, actually, one other thing on that. So, of course, you saw the SharePoint. So the idea was to have SharePoint integration as a possibility, but the Blues weren't really ready to start using SharePoint. So what we did is we used static XML files, and then the SharePoint lists could be published via OData and just plugged into the site. So instead of pulling from a local XML file, you could pull from an OData list. Okay, so what were our threats to success as I was seeing them at this point? We didn't know what kind of complex interactions that the design team was going to come up with. So that was an unknown. We weren't sure how much Silverlight we were going to need. We knew we had this whole multiple videos concept, and that trying to keep multiple videos in sync, that was a concern. And then getting HTML5 and Silverlight to play nicely together because we were doing this hybrid approach. So that was a challenge we knew we had to watch for. So we started into design review. As Ramon said, this is the type of document that they give to us to start that discussion between design and development. So this is a great tool for us. This is where we really start to get an understanding of what the design team has as a vision for the product. Okay, this is where you can really start to get a feel for what they're asking you to build. This is also a great place to start watching for technical feasibility limitations and recommend some alternate approaches. This, at least for initial reviews, is really done internally. We don't start socializing this with our clients yet. This is our check and balance to make sure that we're in sync and the design team isn't asking us to create something that we're thinking is going to be technically infeasible or budget is a limitation. So I want to call out, I guess, a couple things on this slide just to kind of zoom in on as you look at it. You've got three different camera angles you can see there. One in the middle that's larger, two on the sides that are a little smaller. Those videos are in sync, okay? So those are your three different camera angles of the maneuver. You've got a 3D diagram of what the jets are doing in the middle there at the bottom, and you've got some telemetry data. So you've got the aircraft speed, their altitude, etc. Those are some of the key elements here that are going on in this wireframe. This allows you, as a development lead, I can start looking at this, asking questions, getting clarification, and also start thinking about which technology is this going to fit in. And this is Silverlight, by the way, as you can imagine with all this video and interactions. But this helps me to start figuring out who on my team I need to do this particular page. And one of the things we ran into is, as a technical limitation, as you guys probably know, the video feedback, the video formats for Windows don't support alpha transparency. So that was going to be a challenge. We had to try and figure out how we were going to deal with having some transparencies. And then this whole 3-video thing was a real, again, a fear for me. So we were talking at this point about possibly doing a composite video. But you can't do a composite video with alpha transparency where you've got things broken apart like this. So I said, what can we do, designers, to try and change the design so that maybe we could do a composite video, and maybe we just switch out the composite videos so that we have one of them large and the other two are small. So this is, again, the great thing about the design team. I can go to them and say, this isn't going to work, think of something else. And so this is what they came up with. It's basically the same thing, but you can see things are moved now. You've got the 3 videos together in a pod. And so this allowed the possibility for us to now think of things in a different way that might be more technically feasible, but still conveys the image and the vision that the designers have. And also, I guess I want to, so I'll talk about it here in a sec. So again, this is design review. Understand the designer's vision, watch for those challenges and pitfalls that you might be running into, and start planning your team's work. Because the next thing that happens, as you saw with Roman's talk, is we start creating high fidelity comps. And it's kind of what I like to call the kid in the candy store moment, because when you show this to the client, you don't want to say, oh yeah, and that thing up there, you can't have that because I can't do it. And that, no, I'm not going to be able to do that one either. So this is like I say, that kind of that kid in the candy store moment. You don't want to be taking things away from the client when they see this, right? Okay. So this is at this point where we start seeing the high fidelity comps. This is where we can start making decisions about, okay, so technology. This is, again, a Silverlight only element. So we know that this is going to be Silverlight, so we know that we need vector graphics for this piece, right? But we also have some pieces, like the menu, we actually did in HTML. So the menu items are going to be raster graphics. So we start breaking up the graphics as the types we need depending on target technology. This is also where we receive that style guide information from our designers. We get our color palette. We get the font families, all that kind of information that drives into development so that everybody's consistent. And again, as Roman said, we are lucky in that we can lean on our design team to start cutting up the assets where needed. They actually help build a lot of the component and font and color libraries in Silverlight for us. So we had a blend asset library that we could start drawing from right into development. And this also allows you to start setting a timetable. This is a complex piece. It's going to take a while to build. So designers, I really could use these assets up front. If there's anything we could push off on some of the building of comps till we get some of this out, that would be great because that's going to help my dev team. And again, this is just to reiterate those things. Identify your assets, get your style guide information, start setting your responsibility in your timetable. Okay, so one of our technical hurdles, making Silverlight behave with HTML. Okay, so what you've got here, this is a map page showing the locations, just the top part of it, showing the locations of where the blues are performing. The top line, or the top image there, is how the site looks when you go see it. Again, I told you that the menu is HTML. So you see the HTML is actually sitting over the big maps Silverlight component. Everything looks really nice, crisp, fits well. The one below that is where you don't tell Silverlight to behave. The only difference between these two is a single argument in the object setup in the HTML. That's that line at the top. So if you had that param named windowless value equals true, it basically tells Silverlight to fall into the standard HTML layout and behave nicely. If I delete that line from that one page, you get the lower graphic. So that's a good little tip. A couple of things I wanted to call out about this windowless true. Microsoft says on their information about it that complex animations and high-definition video content will not perform well in windowless mode, and it's not supported in full screen mode. So those are a couple caveats. And then they also say issues due to browser and platform limitations. Visual tearing in animation and video playback may happen on Windows XP and Vista. So you have some potential for risk there, but what we found actually, because we're doing a lot of interactions and a lot of media, rich media, it actually worked very well for us, and we really didn't have too many issues. The one place where we had some issues is we tried to do some HTML animations over the top of the Silverlight animations at the same time. We got some weirdness, so we avoided that. Okay.
Excuse me.
Yes?
All this going to be available for us to download the slides and talk? Is this being recorded for another session?
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm not sure if the video is recorded from this session, but we will make the slide deck available, yeah. So this whole multiple synchronized videos concept again, and this is three different sections of the Big Buck Bunny video that probably everybody has seen looking at some of the smooth streaming content that Microsoft has put out. But it's just to illustrate that concept of 3 videos, playheads, all in sync, right? And as I talked about the alpha transparency already, I'm not going to cover that again. Some people have probably seen this example of using a chroma key instead of an alpha transparency. It's kind of a dirty solution to it. It doesn't always work real cleanly. There's actually a reference example of this that Microsoft has out on the web of 2 people dancing over the background, and you can see edges to that. And we decided that it wasn't going to look real good. And Tony will actually talk a little bit more about that, but we still had this whole transparency issue we had to deal with. And then one other thing, you remember those telemetry boxes that you saw on the wireframe? So that was data that we were either going to have to embed in the video, or we were going to have to surface as Silverlight. We ultimately decided to surface it as Silverlight media over the top because it was always clean and sharp. But that was another challenge we had to come up with. And I'll actually show you how we finally came up with a solution to this in just a few slides. Okay, so we have those visions of the aircraft. So you can see the Hornet and you can see the C-130. You can actually rotate them around 360 degrees. You can actually reconfigure them. Not really reconfigure them. You can open the canopy. You can put up the landing gear. So you can actually interact with these 3D models. But we had to figure out: should we use an image sequence, or should we use a video where we scrub the playhead programmatically? And we talked about some pros and cons. We prototyped some of these things, as we've mentioned. So Tony and I worked a lot on trying to figure out what the right approach to this was. And we went with a slightly less technical approach in that we used a series of images. But some of the benefits to that are you get a much better image quality, and again, it's a little bit easier to maintain. And again, Tony will talk more in detail about this. One other thing I'm going to call out, the hotspots. You can imagine going through 90 different frames of a 3D rotation and trying to place those dots is going to be a bit of a challenge, right? So the 3D team actually was able to put on the model for us dots and render a render with a colored dot that we could then pick up and find those locations for all 90 frames. So we actually leveraged the 3D team to help us in dev. Okay, so we did a divide and conquer approach on the development. We knew we had HTML, we knew we had Silverlight. On the HTML side, we let our developers just work as if the content was completely static. So they did all their CSS, they did their HTML markup, they threw in static images, they threw in static text. They got it pixel perfect, or as close as they could. They didn't have to worry about any integration, which is beautiful for them. They're not, they're not running into something where they go to build and run the project and, oh, somebody broke the back end, now I'm stuck. So we really focused on letting them just do the visuals. And then we came back through a second pass and said, okay, this is what the static content's supposed to look like. Let me go pull in the data and make it the same format. So static content came second. Then we did the Silverlight development in its own sandbox. I think one of the limitations that I see most of Silverlight right now is it's really hard with a development team to share working on the same project. We ran into some issues where the designers were trying to go in and make changes and the developers were trying to go in and make coding, and they were colliding. I don't have a good sense yet of a good workflow for that design dev handoff in Silverlight. But we did keep it in its own sandbox, and then we did a couple prototypes for integration testing, but ultimately we basically left that until the end. One thing I will say about this is the development team that did the Silverlight side and the development team that did the HTML side, I didn't, as an architect, come in and say, here is where you're going to start your Silverlight route. And that created some problems because we had some relative pathing we wanted to do for the config files, and the Silverlight guys thought that they were going to be in a different folder than they were, and so we actually had to traverse some of the pathing, and it was ugly. So, lesson learned, if you're doing a hybrid site and you're going to be pulling dynamic content in and pushing it to the Silverlight, figure out that architecture early and make sure everybody's following it. Okay, so progressive enhancement. I'm sure that the design folks understand that. Probably a lot of you developers understand it as well. It's a term that was coined by Stephen Champion in 2003. What it really boils down to is build out your content, design it for accessibility, make the markup semantic, and then add your layers of basically prettiness and enhancement, visual enhancement to that. So that at the base, you've got all your content there, and then you sexy it up as the user's environment supports. So that was the approach we did here, and I'll show you some examples of this. Okay, so this is an all HTML and JavaScript page. So just so you understand what you're looking at. Except for the callout tile. Now watch as the mouse moves. You see that those animations build in. Now this is what Roman showed us his vision of how that those call to action tiles are supposed to look. So he gave us, as the design team, what the interaction was supposed to feel like. So if the user has Silverlight, they get the animated tiles, and this is part of that double asset creation. If the user doesn't have Silverlight installed, same page. As you move your mouse over, you still get a call to action tile, but now it's straight HTML. If you didn't know, because you didn't have Silverlight installed, would you know that you were missing something there? I'd argue that you don't, right? And so that's the goal of progressive enhancement. The user doesn't experience a real lesser experience unless they know that something richer is out there. So we tried to make as much of the site accessible to everybody as possible. Now, the Silverlight, we couldn't do that, but we did that as many places as we can. So I'm going to actually talk a little bit more about some of the HTML-only progressive enhancement. This is a different page in the site. Again, this one is truly, other than, well, again, you've got the call to action tiles at the top. Everything else is HTML and jQuery. So what you're going to see here is, as I play this, you're going to see what the interaction is like with the full experience with CSS and JavaScript enabled. Oops, you will if I do it right. So as the user mouses over and clicks, you see that we display the content for each section as applicable. Again, this is all based on HTML and jQuery. So we built our own jQuery components plugins off of the jQuery framework. So it's no real smoke and mirrors here. It's just a development team that is really good with some JavaScript. A couple things I actually want to call out here also is, I don't unfortunately have a good video of this, but I don't know if you can see little arrows down in the bottom right-hand corner of the photo section there. Those two arrows just cycle you through the photos. We've got photo galleries where you can move through them one at a time. We have a research team in-house, and so we do user research and feasibility, accessibility research. One of the things we found is we did some of that research looking at some of the touch devices like the iPad is users are starting to expect this experience where they get some kind of a visual feedback when they reach the end of something. So if you're sliding through a web page and you get to the end, you pull down, it doesn't go any further, and it may bounce back a little bit. So what we did is we did the same experience here. When you get to the end of a list, when you click on that, it actually slides a little and it pops back. It says, no, you're at the end, you don't go any further. You know, the other options are wrapping around, and then sometimes you don't know how many times you've gone around until you're like, I think I saw that picture already. So you don't have to do that, and then you don't have to have that last button just get disabled, because then you don't know, did the site break, or am I really at the end? So that was kind of a neat little usability thing that we plugged into this site that was from some of our research experience, and so that we think is a really good user interaction that the HTML and JavaScript was able to provide for us. Okay, so this is the exact, and all I did is disabled JavaScript. Now what you can see, it's not nearly as nice a layout. All the content's on the page. All the content is properly styled with CSS. No, you're not getting as rich an experience. It's not like a rich UI, but it's all there, okay? Third slide. Same page, no JavaScript, no CSS. All the content is there, okay? So even if you're coming in with, say, an old BlackBerry that doesn't even support some of the new CSS, you're still going to be able to see the content. That's really cool. Another thing that this really helps with is 508 compliance. Screen readers can consume this very cleanly, right? One other thing I'll call out here is, if you look at the top there, there's a link, I don't know if you can read it. The very top link there says skip to content. If you're using a screen reader and you have to listen to the screen reader read every one of your navigation elements at the top of the screen every time, that gets tedious. So we provide a skip to content link at the top of the page so you can jump down to what you care about. All right, so what did we actually use Silverlight for and why? The aircraft 3D, as I talked a little bit about, that spinning the aircraft 360, we were able to do a lot of more rich interactions with popping up hotspots and things like that. Inside the demo was truly the most challenge. Inside the demo, so the Blue Angels call the air show the demo, their demonstration. So this is that, what's the experience when, you know, the virtual experience of seeing the show. So we used a composite video for this. I kind of alluded to that before. But what we actually did is we made the entire thing. So the 3 panels at the top plus the 3D maneuver example at the bottom, it's all one big video. Why? Well, we're able to leverage IIS smooth streaming so that the video starts quick. You get as good a quality as you possibly can based on your bandwidth connection. And when you switch camera angles, because we're using Silverlight and we're using the Silverlight media framework and the video brush, we can actually rebrush elements of the screen onto different locations, and there is no rebuffering. You never start buffering back from the beginning. So really cool. Now, I do have to I have to mention here, and I'm sorry, I got to scroll down on my notes because it's below my fold here. I wanted to just call out, so Corey Schumann is a Microsoft MVP. He helped us with this project as a developer on the Silverlight side. He's written a book on Blend. He is doing some Windows Phone development now, also a lot of the Silverlight. He's the one who came up with this concept for us of how to deliver this rich content. Great guy. He actually is speaking in the Inspiring UX Lightning Series in Breakers L on Tuesday from 3:30 to 4:30. So if you'd like to hear a little bit more from him, he is here in the building this week. Oh, I gotta call out another thing here. So I told you we have this, if you can imagine this composite video, and I'll show you what it looks like, next slide here. If you can imagine this composite video playing in the background where you can't see it, we're using heuristics that's built into the Silverlight media framework to determine what the appropriate bitrate to download to you is. We originally, because we weren't displaying it, we had it as like a 20 by 20 pixel postage stamp off in the corner of the site, right? Who cares? It's not being seen. Problem is, the heuristics that determine your bitrate, it looks at it and says, well, how big is it on the screen? Well, if you've got a 20 by 20 postage stamp, you just need the smallest bitrate. This drove us crazy for a really long time. So if you're using IS smooth streaming, make sure your player, even if you're not going to render it at that size, make sure your player is big enough to force the bandwidth up so that you get the best quality that your connection can support. Okay, so here's that composite video. Oops, let me play it. What does this look like in motion? So you've got your 3 camera angles. You've got your 3D maneuver. You can see it's all one big composite video. So this is what's playing in the background using the Silverlight media framework, streaming an IIS smooth streaming feed. What you're seeing here also in this player, Alex Zambelli is a Microsoft person who focuses really on Silverlight and smooth streaming. This is a video player that he has available online, so you can plug any URL that goes to a smooth streaming video into this browser page and it will display all this information. So I'm actually going to play it one more time again if it'll let me. You can see things like your frame rate, the bit rate that's currently downloading, history grid down the bottom that shows you what bandwidth you've been downloading as you progress. Great tool for troubleshooting Silverlight. You've got to have a cross-domain policy file on your server, of course, to be able to access it from this site, but great tool, and there is a slide with some resources. This is in there. Okay, so again, just to walk you guys through what this looks like. We take our composite video, it's playing in the background. We take, this is what you see on the screen. We take each section, we use the video brush to rebrush it and place it on the screen where we want it. So you can click on the different camera angles and they flip and move because all we're doing is brushing video content. We're not re-downloading a new file. All right, so checking your work. Why do we involve the design team in our QA? It's an integral part of what we do because we do very technical designs. We really need to have those designers' feedback to make sure that we're executing on their vision. Here's an example of where that came into play. This is the comp for one of the pages, the show information page. You can see on the left-hand edge, I had to figure out which hand was which, the locations and hosting tiles. Those are some of those animated tiles again. And then you've got 2 more buttons, the FAQ and the external links. Those 2 bottom buttons were actually to be anchored at the bottom of the page to kind of fill that space. But this didn't work so well when we actually had real show data. Here's the page after we actually built it. As you can see, the schedule goes below the fold. If we left the buttons anchored to the footer, you wouldn't have known that those 2 other buttons were there until you scrolled down the page. So this is a place where the designers actually appreciate that feedback loop as much as we appreciate being involved in the design discussions. They can now see this and say, oh, we need to redesign that. That's not going to work. So when they actually see the site with real content, they start to see that there may be some deficiencies in their design that we can tweak. Okay, so that concludes my section here. Again, just to reiterate, you need to understand your client's needs and always keep them in mind as you're doing development. We need to keep the site easy to maintain, rich, interactive. You want to understand and support your product vision from your design team. They are what's going to make you look good. Okay, these guys are what makes people say, that's an amazing site. I can only take partial credit. And then really, really leverage the talents of your team. Prototype, collaborate, get everybody's brains around this and look for elegant, creative solutions to the challenges you're facing. And here is that resources slide. I did want to actually talk about one more thing here. So the Silverlight Media Framework is what it used to be called. The new name for it is Microsoft Media Platform. You're actually there are some sessions here at Mix this week that talk about the Microsoft Media Platform. So if some of the stuff we talked about today interests you, you may want to take in some of that, some of those sessions. And then again, Alex Zambelli's Smooth Streaming Media Player online. Thank you very much.